while introducing myself, I forgot the most important thing. I'm in the law business. I mean, I teach law. I'm a faculty member at the law school in Zefat University, which is in the northern part of Israel. And most of my life I've been teaching tort law, which is a part of private law, as most of you know. Excuse me. And I've been doing this new subject of bioethics only for the last 2 or 3 years, and I find it very interesting to combine the law and bioethics. And when I was considering my topic for this workshop, I decided to go for gene editing and the legal aspect of it. And I was sure that, excuse me, I was sure I would find very clear answers for all the questions I had. And the bottom line of my presentation will be maybe a sorrowful one, saying that there are no clear answers to almost none of the questions I asked myself and you could be asking me later on. Because the law, as usual, is lagging behind, and whereas technology becomes more and more enhancing, goes further and further, and becoming more modern, the law hardly understands what's happening. And before the legal profession, the politicians understand what it is all about, there's not going to be any legal solution to most of the issues I'm going to talk about. I'll start with maybe a personal confession. When I started to prepare my presentation, I was considering what should be the best way to start rolling the issues. And I came to a movie which some of you might have seen a few years ago. The name of the film is What Happened in Gattaca. I don't know who has seen this film. If anybody would say to me a few years ago that I would be watching this film and enjoying this film and thinking about this film, I would have said that he's out of his mind. But anyway, when I considered it, I think this is the right place to start in using Gattaca as a starting point to my presentation, doing with the gene editing, which is nowadays in a crossroad. We are in a crossroad between competing interests, competing personal human rights interests, competing public interests, and competing personal private interests and public interests. And this crossroads is demanding to find the answers. And as I've said before, my bottom line at the end of the presentation will sadly be that there are no answers whatsoever. As I've already said, we are dealing with modern technology, which always precedes the law. It goes faster and faster ahead.
Yeah.
The technology usually have global effects. I mean, it affects globally. It doesn't affect one nation and leave the others out. ethical norms are also usually global, yet political, religion, cultural norms are usually local. Here's where we go to the local side. And legal regulation of biomedical technologies should reflect both international, global, and national, local norms. So again, we are in a crossroad where we have to combine the international and the local and the global. Another film which could be relevant to our theme this morning, again, I wonder if some of you have read the book, A Brave New World. Oddly enough, it is mentioned in most of the papers I read before this conference. It's a very popular one, and the story goes about people who are predetermined, divided to classes, working class and intellectual class, and this is the way they live their lives. I mean, a dystopian world. Maybe we are almost there. I don't. And here's Gattaca. No, this is again another movie. Somehow, in all the movies I watched in preparing this talk, everything seems very well settled. Every question has an answer. The world is divided to good and bad. The world is divided to valid and invalid. The world is divided to black and white. This is the theme we were talking about. But in reality, it's different to draw the line. So again, do Android dream of electric sheep? I wonder, have you read the book? Have you seen the movie? It's amazing. It's a Blade Runner. The first one, 20 years ago, I think, and the second one is 2 or 3 years ago. Also very relevant. It seems to be a dystopian world, but this world is already here. I mean, I find some of the main issues brought up by these films very relevant to my talk today, and here's Gattaca. And I can share with you that a few days ago I participated in a conference, a very important conference in Israel, by the Israeli National Science Association, and the president of the association, a very prominent professor, started her presentation with Gattaca. So if she could do it, then I can do it also. And I'd like just to remind those of you who don't remember the theme of the film or don't know it, that the story is about 2 brothers. One is valid and one is invalid. The valid one is supposed to be one of the group who are going to the moon, who are participating in a plan to go to the moon. The invalid one is the one who is part of a group who are serving the valid group. And at the end of the film, the invalid one goes to the moon while the valid one has a sad end. So the main theme of the story and the main theme of my talk today is the same. Do we have a choice? How can we, are we allowed to decide regarding the issues we raised a few minutes ago? Are we allowed to decide for ourselves? Or is somebody going to decide my fate? Is somebody going to decide if my children will be valid or invalid? And I can share with you that when I started to prepare this presentation, I was all against gene editing. I was so sure of myself that I said, okay, I'll do 5 or 6 I'll give 5 or 6 sentences and then I can sum up because it's very clear cut. Now I'm not so sure. I mean, after thinking about it, after looking at both sides of the story, I'm not so sure. That's because, mainly because I listened to a talk, a TED Talk, one of the many TED Talks you can find on YouTube, by a very prominent professor who started with a question, very regular question, very everyday question. And he asked, if I'm going to have a son, and I want my son to be natural one, unedited, but I know that at the same time my neighbor is going to have a son, he's going to gene edit his son, he's going to be brighter and more beautiful and more successful than my son. Do I really, what would be my choice? And then I started to hesitate. My answer was not so clear again because I couldn't decide whether I want nature to take over, and nature, is that everybody knows, is not so perfect all the time, or do I want to be on the safe side and pre-decide what's going to happen. So this is the story, and this is the main thing I'm going to talk to you about. And it's very interesting that when Gattaca was aired, it was very real to people. And the movie, you can read here, the movie was promoted with a fake aid. It was a fake aid in which people could use help to genetically alter their own embryos. And there was a huge enthusiasm of the people to use this service and to change the genetics of the children, which is of course fake. But it was very interesting because the movie was made, I think, 20 years ago. And if 20 years ago this was the effect of such an ad, I wonder what could be the effects today. Another interesting point about the movie, the original ending of the Gattaca film was different from the one we see today when we watch the movie. The original ending had the images of Albert Einstein, Abraham Lincoln, Jackie Joyner, and Stephen Hawking, along with the text saying, if genetic screenings had existed in their lifetimes, they would never have been born. Okay? These four extraordinary people would have never been born if there was a pre-gene selection scheme. All four suffered from genetic flaws. Einstein had dyslexia, Lincoln had Marfan's syndrome, Joyner had asthma, and Hawkins, we all know what happened to Hawkins. It also, the film also ended with the text that you, the viewer, wouldn't have existed either. I mean, all of us have flaws. So how would we react at the thought that we wouldn't have been here if Gattaca was real and pre-selection was really affecting all of us? So, leaving Gattaca aside, I can only say that Gattaca is already here. I started with a movie of 20 years ago, but it's already here, and there had already referred you to the unbelievable series Unnatural Selection at Netflix. You can find it in tonight in your hotel rooms if you have nothing else to do. It's, for me, it was awful watching all these crazy people injecting themselves with weird things, biohackers, and they were ready to suffer all the consequences only for the sake of science, of trying, of feeling everything causes themselves. Gattaca is already here because you can, all of you can buy a do-it-yourself kit and do whatever you want in most of the, at least Western countries that I know of, which is frightening. We all remember, everybody who was here in January, we all remember has the Chinese twins born last November, and since then we have a Russian baby gene edited this year, 2019. So the gene editing is already here. It's not a Gattaca in the future anymore. What's wrong with gene editing? Is it wrong? We've started mentioning a few points on this issue. My answer is that everything can be wrong. Nothing can be wrong. Or the most frightening one, we don't know. And I think the right answer is we don't know. We don't really know. We know that it's possible, we know that people are doing it, we know that legislators are contemplating what to do with it, but we don't really know where we are heading and how to regulate this new world. Just one more reminder which can demonstrate what can be wrong. If I asked before, so what's wrong with Gattaca? What's wrong with being valid? What's wrong with having the best baby I can have if I can gene edit? Before, the answer is here. Frankenstein is an example for what could be wrong, and we can't set aside this example because this again started with the best intentions of science, the best intentions of the doctor, the best intentions of humanity, and it ended with a huge disaster, as we all know. I was talking before about public concerns and personal concerns, and I'll show you just a few of them, and we have many. The first and most important public concern is that we shouldn't play God. We don't have anything to do with nature, we don't have anything to do with natural life, so this is God's department, and we shouldn't be playing God. We should do no harm. This is the first basic bioethic pillars. First, do no harm. There is a potential of abuse of power. States will start growing their own military. They can do whatever they want. They can order new soldiers. They can order new scientists. They can order whatever people they want. Abuse of power, abuse of money is there. He said, economic, financial interests also involved. Who decides? What about equality? Equality between people, the ones who have and the ones who have not. Will there be a world for people who can gene edit their babies, and a different world for those who can't? What about pluralistic society? This is a very important issue, and we should safeguard the pluralistic society as much as we can. Also, we need to think about global cooperation. I've said that technology is global. Regulations usually are local. How can we achieve a global cooperation? How do we control public information? What would we do with public information? All these public concerns we have to take into account before we even start regulating or legalizing this issue of gene editing. And the personal issues. As I've said before, the right to write our personal life story. Each and every one of us has the right, and it's a basic right, and to my mind it's the most important right of every human being, the right to take our own decisions and to decide whatever is best for us and decide for our children. And autonomy is becoming more and more important in modern legal systems. So what about autonomy? What about privacy? Privacy is also very important. Where does it go if gene editing is allowed? Equality, I've talked about equality. One of the main issues raised regarding to the gene editing modernization is that natural genetics pose even more worse hazard than genetic editing. I mean, genetic editing is hazard. I mean, we still don't know all the dangers, but natural genetics is also very dangerous. We all know it. This is where it all started. So, which one is the better? So here we are again, back at where we started, to clone or not to clone, and what does the law say about this issue. There's almost worldwide legal prohibition on cloning. I won't go into details, but 29 of the 47 members states of the Council of Europe are against gene editing. The US Congress has banned the Food and Drug Administration from considering germline editing trials. Australian law, we have an Australian law. The Israeli legal system also has a moratorium until 2020. So, and we all witnessed the reactions to what happened with the Chinese twins last year. Everybody was against it. So it is also a good clue to where the law is going. These are some of the debates you can find on the net today. Look, all the reactions are just from the last few months or so. This is one of the relevant topics going around the net, attracting more and more international attraction. One of the problems of the legally regulating gene editing is that there's current uncertainty in this whole new technologies. Nothing is still clear-cut. You have here one example, a very moving one, I'd say. You have research published in 2014 about a gene which is responsible for people being gay on one hand, 2014, and everybody was sure and happy that we found a cure to the gene of being gay. Anybody needs a cure. 5 years later, there's a new research, a longer one, a faster one, saying the opposite. So, where does it lead us? Let's say that somebody used the 2014 research and biohacked his own genes to get rid of this supposedly gene responsible for being gay. And 5 years later, he or she finds that it was nothing at all. I mean, it was useless or even harmful. What do? We undo what we did 5 years ago. It's unbelievable and unreliable. I mean, we can't rely on new technologies as long as we are not sure where it's leading us. We all remember the science illiteracy back in the 1930s when people were sterilized for being unstable, for being feeble-minded. It wasn't so long ago. So where does science lead us? It's that the uncertainty is frightening, and as long as it is uncertain, the law cannot decide where it's going and what to do with all this modern trend or technology. During the last few months, we have some very loud international concerns regarding this issue. There was an international committee collaborating between the US National Academy of Medicine, the US National Academy of Sciences, and the UK Royal Society banning this gene editing. The WHO did the same. Then we have 2019, China drafts new regulation on high-risk biomedical technologies. We have opposition in the US. We have a very interesting paper from Max Planck Research Institute. If you are interested in this topic, you should look for the Max Planck paper. Very intensive, very thorough. Germany is one of the leading countries against gene editing, but lately, during the last few months, we have different voices in Germany for trying, for allowing gene editing. So maybe here's a good start for anybody who wants to enhance this line of technology. And I could go on, but time constraint don't allow me to further go into it. There are pros and cons this issue, and the current legal arena is in an unbelievable chaos. There are 4 leading battles. Therapy, which is good, against enhancement, which is some say not so good. Somatic versus germline intervention, which is quite different. We have international concerns against versus national concerns, and we have legal versus ethical concerns, and this is not the same, as we all know. As for international regulations, we are all familiar with the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, 1997, the International Summit on Human Rights, the first one in 2015, and then the second one 2018. The International Bioethics Survey, Asia Pacific, 1994. International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Life and Rights, and International Human Genome Organization, Committee of Ethics, Law and Society of 2017. All of these very esteemed committees, association deal with this, to me, unanswered question of legal issue. As for the Israeli legal regime, I couldn't think about closing a better closing comment. I took the Israeli legal regime as an example. There's, like in many other countries, a legal moratorium on human gene editing, but it's ending quite soon, and nobody knows what is going to happen afterwards. There's the legal liability and responsibility of those who are engaged in gene editing is vague. We have many ethics committees in hospitals, in the academia, and these are those who are liable to have the answers. The Israeli society is very pro-IVF technologies. The Israeli society is very pro-sex selection. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, we have a few laws which regard both autonomy, personal autonomy, and personal safety. We have a basic law, human dignity and liberty, which protects our dignity, our autonomy, our right to decide what happens to us, what happens to the ones who are close to us. We have Patients' Right Act, and we have no wrongful life action. Those of you who are familiar with this last issue, wrongful life action, I invite you to think about what's going to happen to this course of action, to these life stories of pregnancies which ended with an abnormal child due to the negligence of the doctors who didn't warn the parents in time that the baby is going to be sick or unhealthy. Had they known it, they would have done an abortion. Now they have a baby who's unwell. What is the meaning of being unwell in a world of gene edited babies? What's going to happen to all this whole legal issue? In the private law world, we have to think about the prospect of negligent actions. Who's going to be responsible for the new Frankensteins of our time? The researchers, the doctors. Who's responsible for next generations? Who's going to be liable for whatever happens the next day? We don't know. And as long as we don't know, there can't be any laws. And as I've told you before, my conclusion is that at this time, there are no laws which tell us right from wrong, white from black, and there's no answer to the question, is gene editing going to be legal, open to everyone, or not? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tamar. So I'll leave the slides up while we might have questions about them. I'd like to open up for discussion. Any comments? John, your mic is on. Hold on.
I didn't know it was on. Seeing it is. Just one issue you mentioned, playing God. And I think, in one sense we play God, or playing God interfering with nature, which is sort of the secular version of the playing God argument. When we do that all the time, if we take medicine, we're interfering with nature to some extent, or changing the way things would be if the medicine wasn't available. So in a sense we think that at one level playing God or interfering with nature is fine. I think the worry comes when the issues get bigger, like gene editing and so on. Then suddenly we become responsible for all sorts of things we were never responsible before. Because we could say, well, it was just an act of God, and if I have a child who's disabled, it's not my fault, it's just the luck of the draw. But if I've got to say, if I can do something trying to enhance a baby or some sort of gene editing, then suddenly if something goes wrong, it's my responsibility. And I think this is where the playing God or interfering with nature argument becomes worrying, because we're suddenly working outside of an area in which we know anything. We have no experience. We just don't know what to do. So that's why I think we need to be very careful before we embark on some of these things, because we are stepping into the unknown.
Especially you're going to change future generations.
Yeah, that's even worse. Yeah.
Because as long as you decide for yourself or for your children, for your family, that's maybe fine, maybe. But the minute you change society, the future society, then it's quite different.
Other comments? Any other comments or questions? Yes, please.
Thank you for this beautiful presentation. These past few days, I was really thinking of these so-called universal things or common things or standard things, the American way, the Filipino way, the Thai way. Somehow for me, standards or culture becomes oppressive, that it drives people to decide things somehow for themselves, just to cope with these standards, with culture, with the norms. So there are some things that led people to decide, like genetic manipulation or genetic enhancement, so for in some terms. So my comment is that just sometimes culture is very oppressive, or what really drives people to do things for to go for genetic enhancement or engineering. Society, money, or pride, or utility principle, or maybe curiosity.
Two things. One thing, I urge you all to tonight to try to watch at least one of the first part of the Netflix Unnatural Selection. You'll be appalled. You can't imagine until you see these things for yourself. It's difficult to understand how close it is.
So why were you appalled?
It was frightening.
Was it?
Yes.
To you?
Because to me, somebody who injects himself with something he's not sure what it's going to cost him, it's frightening. Yes.
Okay.
On the other hand, I urge you to think about my first example. If you were able to decide that your son or daughter could be better if you interfere in a legitimate way, would you do that knowing that your neighbor is going to do it and his kid is going to be perfect? Would you consider it? Again, I said I was totally against at the beginning. Now, I'm not sure, I don't have an answer. But even thinking about it is important.
Because, see, maybe because I did genetic engineering in the lab all the time, I'm not appalled.
Maybe.
So that's a familiarity. So for me, cooking is biochemistry. If I make a cooking recipe, it's the same.
You were not appalled by what he did to his dogs?
No. Because I grew up in New Zealand and we have prize rams and sheep and they're bred all the time. And if we look at the horse industry, it's shocking. So, of course, it doesn't mean that I didn't think it may be ethical, but I'm not appalled. For example, a recent report in Australia found many of their that they were finding many of their champion stallions at the end of their life are going into hamburgers. So this was something which was shocking for Australians. Is that right, John?
It wasn't shocking for me, but
Yeah. You see, it wasn't shocking for me because we know the world works in this way. And so it's if you're expecting the higher standard, then you think it's shocking. And if you're expecting do-it-yourself biochemistry, it's not so shocking.
Frightening. Let's settle on frightening.
Frightening, maybe, yeah.
Sir?
Yeah, we have another question.
I know, there's also a point. I think one of the reasons why there is less acceptance of the genetic engineering technology is not just about morality or ethics or laws, but because people are still unsure of the results of it, like fear. Like the fear of the unknown. Years before, when the first surgery was yet not done, people are so afraid to do surgeries. But right now, because we know that surgeries could cure people of diseases and whatnot, people are already saying yes to surgery. So I think one of the more problem here is the uncertainty, the fear of people. Because when we talk about negative effects of genetic engineering, most of the reactions that are negative are what ifs. What if this may lead to the eradication of the human species? What if this may affect other species in the environment? So, unless there would be more cases of successful genetic engineering cases, would we be able to lessen the fear and maybe make other countries also and other people open to genetic engineering?
First of all, I think there's a huge difference between countries, cultures, and political issues. There are countries where abortion is allowed, there are countries where abortion is banned. That's one answer I can give you. The second one is just again the question: do anybody knows what happened to the Chinese babies? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. And even if we know tomorrow that they are well,
The Chinese, you ask anybody knows what happened to the Chinese.
the gene-edited Chinese
Oh, yeah.
babies
Okay.
from last year.
Yeah.
We talked about it last year. Are they well? Was it worth it? Because I don't personally know, of course, but there was a lot of controversy over the net. Was it really a cure? Couldn't they be cured in a more conservative way? So it wasn't a clear-cut case. So what happened in the end, I think nobody knows. So yes, I think the uncertainty is the most frightening one. Again, gene editing in agriculture, in animals, is more common.
Yeah.
We are more used to it. We are more used to the zebra, okay? But we are afraid of a zebra baby because we don't know what will happen with it.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Tamar. It's very stimulating.